Hi, and welcome to Real Trail Talk. I am Donovan D'Souza from The Long Ways Better.
And I'm Mark Pybus from The Life of Pi. Welcome to episode 89. We're recording again, which is excellent news. And joining us in studio is Bronwyn, aka Bonny.
Hello.
And we all hiked the South Coast track. So what we're going to do is do a full recap of that day by day and split it up into 2 episodes. So episode 89 will be days 1 to 4. And the next episode will be days 5 to 7 and an overall musing on our experiences out there. So we hiked this, started on the 31st of December 2022, and over the next week we hiked from Melaleuca back to Cockle Creek, and it's about 85 k's, lots and lots of elevation, lots of stunning wilderness in the Southwest National Park, and I think what will come to a conclusion is that it was good fun.
Yes, very much so.
Yes.
Yeah. So the impetus to do this was I'd kind of mentioned to you, Donovan, while we're having dinner one night that I was going to do it. And you were like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Oh, but I've got a baby on the way. And then Alyssa's like, if I don't have to do it, I'm more than happy to look after Miles for a week so you can do it.
Yeah, because I think you were originally talking about going, like you didn't have a set plan per se, but South Coast Track was one of them. And then, I think Alyssa saw an opportunity.
Yeah.
So very quickly it became, you should go with Mark.
Yeah.
And then we mentioned it to Bonny, and Bonny said, that's been on my bucket list.
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, you did a lot of the initial planning and, like, setting the dates and doing the logistics of, like, where we were going to stay each night and book the flights and the transfers out and everything. So that was very good because I didn't have to worry about that. Plus, you had the guidebook and the maps, so it was kind of a bit of a hike where I just showed up and had to do some modelling work.
Yeah, so I bought the map and the guidebook when I was last in Tassie, which was in 2018. And I was meant to have gone back before then, but, I had all the stuff, so it was kind of easy to plan. And, with the itinerary, I just followed John Chapman's itinerary because his itinerary is generally fairly easy to follow. So it's like, yeah, we'll just keep to the standard. And, if we had the sort of view that if something went wrong, we'd just suck it up. And the last day we would double to get to the end.
Yeah. So, yeah, we all flew out just after Christmas, arrived different times in Hobart, but we're all there for the day before and went out to do the Cape Royal track, which is a good starting point for also learning how to be models in Donovan's film series, which is coming out later in the year.
Yep.
But then day one, so this is it's a fun track to explain to anyone because you're like, well, I have to catch a light aircraft out to the middle of nowhere and then you hike back to the southernmost road in Australia.
Yeah.
So it sounds quite adventurous to start with. But you two were quite nervous about the flight out there.
Very. Somewhat irrationally so.
Which is funny because your dad's a pilot, Bonnie, and he was like trying to calm you down and like.
I know, and I've flown in light aircraft many, many times, but I just got it in my head that it's over the mountainous terrain, and I got freaked out.
And I guess, to be fair, there has been fatal accidents with planes heading out that way. There was one probably more like 4 years ago now, where a plane crashed, and because the weather is so notoriously crap out there, there is a real risk of that happening. So
it's a pretty small risk, really. You're probably more dangerous getting to a hike by car.
Yeah, true. But because you can see it happen,
it's just scary because it's scary.
Yeah,
for some people.
I mean, the flight that we took out there was 3 planes. Like take off pretty much one after the other, but we had perfect weather. I would have to say, getting out there. Like we could see all the mountain ranges. We could see, what was it, Hart's Mountain after we flew over the Huon Valley, and then that
Federation Peak.
You guys were on that side of the plane to see Federation Peak, but you couldn't really see what I could see. Just as we were getting into Melaleuca, you could see the track snaking out towards the coast. I was like, that's our first day.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then landing in Melaleuca, it's really just an airstrip in the middle of nowhere. It services some boat tours. There's a small settlement there where I think people have legacy houses.
Yeah, there's like I think a lady who has like the family's, well, they had a tin mine out that way, and
Yeah.
that's it. And then there's like a bird hide. Yeah.
But yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, we got our gas canisters filled up with water, and there's like that excitement to get going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After talking to those two gentlemen that didn't exactly rave about the Port Davey track.
Yeah. From what I've seen, it doesn't look like one I want to do, but yeah, it was interesting to talk to them. And then they were continuing on the South Coast track as well.
But other people I spoke to who'd done the Port Davey track said it was really beautiful. So
Yeah,
who
but
knows?
I guess
Yeah.
it depends on weather. But that is an option if you're not a fan of flying. Like I think one of those guys wasn't.
Yeah.
Is you start at the end of Scott's Peak Dam Road, and then you can walk the Port Davey track and then the South Coast track without ever catching an airplane.
Yeah. And you can instead use the plane to fly in some beer like they had.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or alternatively, I guess some people hike out to Melaleuca and then catch the plane out at the end of the hike. But I think there's a certain adventurous spirit in flying to start a hike.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So day one, it was late afternoon by the time we got in. I think it was about 3 or 4 p.m. maybe.
Yeah,
when we
because
started.
I think the scheduled plane departure was 2:30 or something from Payavion. So yeah, probably about that time when we actually started going, because I think we took a while because we had filled the water and signed in the book and everything. So it takes a little while to get going.
But yeah, this first section's mainly just button grass plains all the way along the glacial valley to the beach, which, I mean, we had perfect weather. There was a nice sea breeze, fluffy clouds everywhere, and it was just like, as I said in the last episode, I was just being a basic bitch and being like, wow, this is amazing.
But it was amazing, like I think where I don't really like that kind of grassland scenery as a place to hike through. I didn't like it when I did the Pingerup Plains, but the difference here is that it's like, oh, look at this giant mountain that's coming out of this, this glacial valley. So that was beautiful.
Yeah, because you're like sandwiched between, I think it's the Bathurst Range, the Melaleuca Range, and the New Harbour Range.
Yep.
And it's just, there's always like a new peak or a new angle to discover. And yeah, I just had a ball photographing this as we're going on.
I really enjoyed it, and I thought the scenery was spectacular, and it was also a nice gentle start to what is mostly quite a challenging track. So it was good to ease into it with a nice gentle, not too much up and down. Anything that could have been muddy had a boardwalk. Maybe it could have been more fun if it was no boardwalks, but
It might have taken a lot longer to get to camp.
Yeah,
so
true.
Yeah.
it's probably good that.
yeah.
I mean, that's something that people should note is don't think that the track is as easy as this the whole way, because this is a bit of a luxury compared to some of the other days.
I don't know. Like I was expecting, like we were joking while we were out there, like, oh, don't get used to this because it's not going to be like this. But I think with the latest track upgrades they've done, like a lot of the like what I assume would be bad stuff further on still had boardwalks, still had
true.
like something to get you through. It wasn't like a slog through mud the whole time.
Yeah.
Like they've done track improvements where it's needed. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I think on balance it was easier than I expected a lot of the time because of the track improvements.
But I mean, this day had no real obstacle course walking at all.
No.
So I think that's still a difference from some of the later days.
Yeah. I think what'll stick with me from this part was definitely there's that first mountain that's in the distance and you've got the boardwalk always leading towards it. And then as you come in to see Franey Lagoon and the ocean, that mountain range to your left, there's this plains all before it. It just looks very much Rohirrim from
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, which Bonny did not bother to watch as homework before because we were going to be quoting it quite a lot.
Yes, as we did.
Yes.
And Bonny was unfortunately
Bewildered all the time. Yeah, we eventually got to the beach though, and it's a weird like portal. I think I wrote this in my post. Is like you're on button grass plains, and then there's like a very short section of like vegetation, and then you just pop out onto the beach.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what was really nice about this was every other day we got to beaches probably at a more reasonable time, but on this day, because it was quite late, the sun was like in a sort of beautifully lit. Like you have that lovely photo on your blog of, it's Bonny, isn't it, walking through?
I've got one of Bonny through the mist, and then I've got one of you two with like a wider shot with the sun just hitting the top of the mountain range, and you guys all lit up as well.
Yeah, it looks just stunning. As one of our friends said, it was rather Tatooine-esque looking with the beach sand.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Bonny's one of those sand sand horses is what I'm gonna call them. No, but it was quite cool. And like, there's this. If you enjoy beach combing, the beaches along here are fascinating just to see what's washed up.
Lots of interesting seaweed and lots of like blue layer type stuff, like the blue bottles and those things.
That was one thing I was
and
like...
lots of shells too.
Yeah, after I saw my first blue bottle, I was like, I don't want to walk barefooted because I like don't want to have to pay attention to every step that I make.
Yeah. Maybe not want to swim on that first day because we saw so many.
But it's a beautiful bay.
Really beautiful.
Cock's Bite.
Yes.
Because there's only singular cocks.
Yes.
But there's a creek in the middle where Franey Lagoon empties out.
Yep.
And that's probably your last water point before camp, which would be good. Like, knowing that, I probably would have filled up there.
Yeah, 'cause you have to walk past the campsite to get to the water.
Yeah.
And I got a bit stressed when we got to camp because I misheard Donovan. I thought he said it was brackish, and then I got really worried. I was like, oh no. But it turned out to be fine.
Yeah,
the whole way along we had really good water.
That one was not too brackish, like I think that was totally fine.
Yeah,
it was only really the last one later
Even the
on.
last one was okay.
Yeah, so Point Eric campsite, it's about a 14-kilometre walk from Melaleuca, all fairly flat, fairly easy. And this campsite, I think, was one of the better ones, probably because of the conditions we got with the sunset and like the warm conditions.
I think as well, it being the last day of the year as well, it just felt like it had a magic quality. We arrived at like 8 o'clock. Yeah. And just the sun is sort of setting, but still in the air. It's golden hour. Beautiful campsite with nice spots. Pretty much on the beach. It was lovely.
Yeah, kind of reminded me of Thailand a little bit.
Yeah.
Just because it was like humid and fairly balmy that night, so it didn't feel like the south coast of Tasmania. But being the middle of summer, it was sunset at like 9:30, and like I think we were having dinner at like 9 o'clock if we got in at 8.
Yeah,
it was just a weird feeling.
Yeah, it was.
But it was really, really nice being camped. Like we were just above the beach where our tents were, so that was very nice, and could hear the ocean. Beautiful natural location.
Yeah, I think I always sleep better when I can hear the ocean like that, so it's good.
Yeah, and that was quite a cool night. I think I had both tent flaps open and my sleeping bag unzipped. It was fairly warm that night, but beautiful. And then moving on to day 2, which I think we can all agree is probably one of our least favourite days.
Absolutely.
Donovan more so because you have no tolerance of heat whatsoever.
I have zero tolerance for heat. And also, as I said, like grassland, those sort of like moorlands are just not of interest to me. I find it hard to enjoy them. And on a hot day, it just exacerbates the enjoyment being just like no shade whatsoever.
It would have been a lot better on an overcast day, that section.
Yeah.
But I thought it had its good points. I thought the long plain sections were... I can understand why you didn't enjoy them, but then the river crossings were fun, and the beach walk was nice at the start.
I think
so it wasn't all tedious. It had some good points.
Was probably a case of expectations versus reality, in that a lot of what you see when people sort of have videos and photos and blogs of this, you see all these creek crossings, and I imagine that it would be forest through all of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
And someone else who was there who said the same thing. He's like, oh, they clearly glossed over all the boring bits because it's like quite a far distance between Louisa Creek and Louisa River, and yet, you know, in the imagination is that, oh, it's all rainforest all the way through, but it's actually
A few patches of forest where the rivers are.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I was
That's a fair point.
looking at the guidebook. John Chapman has like 4 photos for the day. One is of plains, 2 are of the creek crossings. I think one's of the beach or something. And then based off what happened when we came off the beach on day 1 and entered that nice bit of forest, I was like, oh, that's what it's going to be mostly like today. But it was like hot, exposed grassland, which wasn't too bad in places, but it was just very undulating.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the day, it was just like you can see where camp was, but you
Yeah.
never really seemed to get too close to it.
Yeah.
I think it was very energy sapping that day because it was quite warm and the sun was beating down on us. It was a bit muggy as well. Like there wasn't much of a breeze.
Yeah.
I mean, the start is fantastic because
Oh,
you
yeah.
basically step
Yeah.
onto the beach
Yeah,
for
it's a
quite a
beautiful beach
while. We had the black cliffs at high tide, which was a bit
That was
not
fun.
dicey, but yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't dicey, but there was no choice but to get splashed.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's in the video that I shot, there's a scene of like just a wave coming in and just splashes Bonny. So,
I think at that point, because I didn't want to take my shoes off to do it because there was like going to be sharp rocks or
Yeah.
slippery rocks. So that was kind of the start of my annoyance with myself in the day, as I had wet boots pretty much from that point onwards.
yeah.
But yeah, being high tide, couldn't avoid getting wet.
Yep.
And then you kind of walk a short little beach section, cross a creek, and then into the moorlands.
Yeah. That just never ends.
Yeah.
Never end. But this one is like, it's you kind of in the back of your mind, you know, there's a hill ahead. It's the biggest one of the day, and like mentally, I was like, let's just get it over with, and then that's the main challenge gone. But
Yeah.
it didn't quite happen that way.
No, and to be honest, I actually thought this hill for some reason, and maybe it's just because of what my expectation of the Ironbounds was much more like, oh, this is going to be a challenge.
Mhm.
But this hill, which seemed like nothing compared to the Ironbounds, felt a lot worse to me because of the heat.
Yeah, it was quite hot. I remember it being very warm, and then we stopped in the only bit of shade we could find at the base.
Yep.
And stopped for like 45 minutes. And I remember just cooling down, and my heart rate like went like south of 100 beats per minute for the first time in a while. But then, yeah, slogging back up was quite a challenge in the heat.
Yeah.
But in some ways, I think the heat made the river crossings like a nice reward. They were like, each one was like a little oasis. And same with the camp at the end of the day on the river.
Yeah,
It was good that it was a hot day for that.
I think that's true, but that's like saying, being tortured. That someone giving you a hug was like the best thing about the day.
Isn't sleep great when you've worked a 12-hour day? It wasn't too bad. Like, I think from the top of the hill down to the first creek crossing was a bit kind of tedious because the views of the Ironbounds, while nice, didn't really change. And it was very because the quartzite you're walking on is bright white, and it just radiates off all of that sun.
Yep.
Which is like, I can't believe, Bonnie, you did this whole hike without sunnies on.
I'm actually getting sunnies now. So that's another story.
I just
Yeah, I
can't
usually
believe it.
I never wear sunnies, but that might change from this year onwards.
Yeah.
Like whenever I took mine off to do something, like clean or whatever, I would be like, the sun.
I've just never liked wearing sunnies because I prefer to see everything in its real colours.
Mm.
But yeah, I agree. I probably should wear them.
It's amazing you're not squinting all the time in Donovan's videos. But we did eventually reach that first creek crossing, which was Faraway Creek.
Yep.
And yeah, beautiful spot. Like you descend down, very brown, tannic river. I think we got it probably at the lowest it's probably ever going to be during the year. So it was just more of a little wade.
Yeah, I could
Yeah.
imagine it could be quite challenging after lots of rain.
Yeah, I've seen videos and photos of it after much more significant rain. And planning this whole trip, there's this like famous photo that Australian Geographic always uses of these crossings, and it's a guy with like a yellow jacket crossing there, and Bonny has a yellow jacket, and we were gonna do like the adventure shot, and it was just like
just a bit too hot.
it doesn't
It's too
look,
hot,
and also it
yeah.
doesn't look like a real adventure because
No.
it's just a nice,
Nice
easy
shallow
creek.
creek crossing. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they've got like ropes to help you grab onto something, but we didn't really use them at all,
No.
other than for balance, I think, at Louisa River.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, but this is like, I was so annoyed at myself this day because I already had wet boots, but I just made it worse by not taking them off for these crossings.
yeah.
So yeah, that was probably the downer on the day for me. But
And I was very happy to be wearing trail runners. And before the hike, I was 50-50 on whether I should wear the trail runners, but I'm glad I did. For the conditions that we got, I might have regretted it if we had wetter conditions.
Yeah, I think for the first couple of days, or maybe first 2.5 days, I think trail runners are really, really good footwear.
Even on the really muddy day, it was fine.
Yeah, I did notice
With
though.
gaiters, I must say.
I did notice that you avoided the mud a lot more than Mark and I did.
Yeah, maybe.
Whereas I think that if you're wearing boots, you can be a little bit more blasé about the mud.
Yeah, because with trail runners, like just a little bit of moisture, even if they're like ankle deep, you just soak everything through.
Yeah. But at this day, yeah, I kind of see. In hindsight, I would have taken my shoes off every creek crossing and just gone stuff it, even though it takes more time.
Yeah.
I'd rather that than because I had blisters as a result of it, I reckon.
An interesting choice, Bonnie, to wear white trail runners.
Well, that wasn't a choice. They were on sale. So
Does
they
DVCA
came out
not
not
pay you
too
enough?
badly after I washed them.
They did change colour over the course of the trip.
Yeah, it was funny when we did a creek crossing after some mud and Bonnie's shoes would just magically appear white again. But we had lunch here because it was about the middle of the day by the time we arrived. And the Kiwi couple that we were on the same itinerary with were also here. But, I mean, we weren't very social these first few days.
Yeah, I feel like you're getting to know people and
Yeah.
you probably want to stick to your group. And so we didn't really talk as much until later on.
Yeah. But then leaving Faraway Creek, it's really not far to Louisa Creek, but it felt a long
Oh,
time.
it's because it's only like 700 meters,
Yeah.
but I felt like we were walking for like double what that feels like to me. Like,
Yeah.
a kilometer feels like X amount of time, and it felt like we were walking for 2Ks.
Yeah, so it's very up and down. Like, sometimes the views would be there, sometimes they wouldn't, and having no breeze, it just made it hotter and hotter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then Louisa Creek, another kind of very samey creek crossing in that, like, you've got rocks and a little bit of water. I think I put my gaiters on for this.
Just try something different.
Just trying to keep the water out. It made no difference whatsoever, and I was so cranky at the other side.
Yeah, I remember you were like, "Oh, I have these boots, and they're absolutely worthless."
Like pouring water out of them. And then not far off from that, I was just like, I can't walk for another 3 hours in these boots. So I like took them off and just walked in my thongs.
Yeah.
Fun. But yeah, I mean, it's not too bad. There's a point, I think, after the turn off to Louisa Bay where it gets better. But yeah, Louisa Bay is, I think it's a 6 kilometre return, like, detour.
Yeah.
Which I think if it hadn't have been so hot, we all probably would have been happy to do.
I really would have liked to have done that, but I think I was just feeling low energy, and it's probably for the best that we didn't. Although if I did the South Coast track again, I'd make a point of heading down to Louisa Bay.
The people who did go on that day, they said there was no water, and it was basically just 6Ks of walking along the same sort of grasslands to the beach. So on a day like that, I think when we were already a bit pissed off with the weather, it's probably not a...
As I was super excited, I was like, well, let's stay there after watching Aaron Gray's video because it looks so amazing. But then when you're out there and like weighing up, like that's an extra 6Ks, I'm already feeling like not great. I wasn't bummed about missing it.
Yeah. Mind you, so he did an extra day to do it.
Yeah.
And then the next day he had like a short day to Louisa River. So I think if you plan the itinerary like that, then that probably is okay. Whereas I think if we had to add that in and then rush to Louisa River, either as part of day 2 or making that part of day 3, that would be less enjoyable.
Yeah. But yeah, after the track junction, you kind of wind around a bit of a corner, and then you enter like some nice forest. And I think we all kind of breathed a sigh of relief of like, oh, thank God we're
Bit of
undercover. Yeah,
Yeah.
in the shade.
I was slightly annoyed with these like pockets of forest because the umbrella had to close the hiking umbrella down every time we entered these forests, and then we'd emerge into more grassland and I have to open it again.
Yeah.
So that was a bit annoying, having these little pockets, because I'll say while the hiking umbrella was a godsend for the open sections on days 1 and 2, not so useful in the forest sections because of how enclosed the forest is. Like it was just a bit of a, sometimes the umbrella would get stuck on trees and stuff like that.
Not sometimes, a lot of times.
Very
You're like,
often.
Mark, can you just untangle me?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Although I must say I was a bit envious of your hiking umbrella when the sun was beating down on us.
Mm.
And I'm going to buy one myself.
So you too can look like a doofus like me.
Yay!
But then there was like a really long section of plainsy type, which was the only time I really enjoyed the plains today, because you had Mount Louisa to the left, which was really imposing.
Actually, that was really good views.
Yeah.
The Ironbounds to the right with like the tree cover of Louisa River there, and the kind of bit overcast by this stage, and the heat of the day had worn off a little bit, and we were sort of close to camp, but not really.
Yeah. There was one bit where we descended. I was like, oh, we're going to be there like now.
Yeah.
And it's like, no.
Yeah, we're good. Is that where we bumped into that couple that were like, oh, you're filming this? And like, wow, what a setup you've got.
Yeah, and they had seen like this crazy sort of silver blob coming towards them. They're like, what is it? And they realized that hiking umbrella.
Yeah. And then the last little section through a prescribed burn that had happened last autumn, which was very controlled and necessary.
But made me feel like home, you know?
Yeah, you're in WA.
Yeah.
Although if it was in WA, they just would have let Louisa River and all the vegetation there
That's
just burn.
right. Yeah.
And then descending down into beautiful kind of rainforesty type vegetation lining the river.
Yeah.
And then there's campsites on either side, but given we didn't really want to wade through water the following morning, we crossed Louisa River that afternoon.
Also, I think there's only a toilet on the other side, so that could be annoying too.
Yeah,
if you're on the wrong
that's
side.
a good point.
Yeah.
But Louisa River again, a bit of a doddle to cross, like not very deep.
Yeah.
Kind of, it was really only the slippery rocks you had to worry about.
Yeah.
There's an easy crossing in the conditions we had, but probably could be a bit more dicey if the river was flowing more.
I've seen a few videos where it's like a raging torrent.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were very, very lucky with this sort of stuff.
And the river by the campsite was most welcome on such a warm day.
Yes.
We spent a while just sitting in the water.
Yep.
And then there's also a beautiful swimming area if you go downstream of I think it's downstream of the crossing.
Yep.
Where I went for a swim there as well. It was very nice.
Yeah.
Nice deep river pool.
When we got there, it was quite crowded. Like every campsite we were at was busy. So I think we kind of just took a spot that we could because we were one of the last ones in. But there's definitely like a large site with a lot to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were some other people who came in after us who had, they had to pick through like some of the lesser spots, whereas I think we had a nice open area.
Yeah, we had a good spot. Although I think we were slightly concerned about tree branches above us. I remember positioning my tent so that if one of the branches fell, it wouldn't land on me.
Yeah, because they had big signs, like, risk area signs saying that branches will fall, so...
But I mean, after a long, hot day, that was just one of my favourite memories, was just sitting with my feet and my legs in the river.
Yep.
Just like cooling down and rehydrating.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really good. I wish I had filmed us sitting in the water, because at that stage I was just like, I don't care about filming, I just want to sit in the water.
Yeah.
But it's a nice memory that I have as well. Yeah.
I've got a nice shot of you just sitting there like a pig in mud.
Yeah.
Like, it's so cold, I'm happy. Because I was like getting quite cold by the end of it, and you were like almost fully submerged.
Yeah, it was lovely. After like being, just so sweaty and hot, that was, as I say in the video, it was a soothing balm after that heat.
So that day is about 18 or 19 kilometres, and for us that was the longest of the days.
It felt longer than it was that day.
Yeah.
It might
Yep.
have just been because it was hot and sunny, or it wasn't even that hot really. It could have been hotter.
Yeah, I think it was
So-
late 20s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it just felt like a long day.
But I think, the thing I'll say, because a lot of people, when they see late 20s, they'll be like, what are you talking about? But in Tassie, late 20s feels much worse than I think what it feels like in other areas.
Yeah, and because the days are longer, like your exposure to the high UV and the sun is a lot more as well.
Mm.
And given there wasn't a sea breeze until the very end, it was just like, yeah. And the walking on the quartzite, which just reflects the heat as well, was, yeah.
Yeah, so the radiant heat is probably...
Plus you're carrying 18 kilos on your back and wearing, well, for both of us, boots with heavy socks and, yeah,
And camera equipment.
camera equipment, long pants. It's just, yeah, it all adds up.
Yeah.
So moving on to day 3. So this is the big one that everyone kind of has in mind when they talk about the South Coast track. And again, it's good fun to explain to people. You basically go from sea level up to 900 and something meters.
980 is it? Or?
Yeah, I think it's 980.
Yeah, and then straight back down, then camp at sea level again.
Yeah. This is why Alyssa didn't want to do it. She saw this and went, nope.
Yeah. And I think we had conversations out there would Alyssa enjoy this bit? And you're like, nope.
Yeah.
But the start of the day, very pleasant. We're up early. Well, you're always up early, Donovan, but Bonny and I tried to be up early and packed
Yep.
because it was such a long day, but spectacular.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the start sees you leave Louisa River, you kind of follow it for a little bit through stunning rainforest, and then you pop out onto the button grass plains where you can see the whole Ironbounds and what you have to
Not
accomplish.
quite the whole Ironbounds. You can see the first part of the climb, but the Ironbounds are once you've done the first climb, there's a few sort of plateaus and stages to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get such a good view of the Ironbounds, and also I think it's Mount Louisa you can see on the side.
Yeah, so if
Yeah.
you look behind you as you're walking, there's Mount Louisa.
Yeah, it's really beautiful views.
Very imposing, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit exciting doing that boardwalk section, but then once you're into the climb, and I think the steepest bit of the whole thing is actually the first section.
Mm.
I think it averages a 25% gradient.
Yeah, I remember that being quite tough, especially. Also, you don't get much breeze at that level as well, so I think it gets a bit easier as you get higher, less gradient and more breeze.
Mm.
And the sun, I think, was out for this first
Yeah, it
part, which
was,
made it feel a
yeah.
bit worse.
It was humid and sunshiny.
But I mean, just lots and lots of steps.
Yep.
It kind of felt a bit bluff knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did.
I actually thought the climb was not as bad as I thought it would be, because it was you got the worst bit out of the way, worst of the climb out of the way, I should say, and then it sort of plateaued out and it became a nice ridge kind of walk. So I felt that while you had that steep bit, you got to sort of take a moment to just appreciate the views, whereas there's a lot of other sort of mountain walks where it's just straight up, and I always talk about the narrative of a walk, and I felt that the narrative of this was actually a nice narrative of very steep plateau and then a bit more climbing, so I quite liked it.
I would agree with that, but I was maybe slightly disappointed that it was cloudy higher up for pretty much the whole day, because I have been told by a friend who's done the South Coast track that the view from high up on the Ironbounds is one of the best views he's ever seen. So I was hoping we'd be able to see Federation Peak and a clear view of Louisa Bay. It was still beautiful, and of course being in the clouds is atmospheric. But I think also on the whole my view of the day was a bit negative, not because it's bad, but I was just in a terrible mood. I wasn't feeling well, so I think at the time I wasn't enjoying it, but I look back at it now and look at the photos and I think, oh, that was actually quite nice scenery.
You were a bit of a zombie going up that climb,
Yeah.
watching you, because we had to stop quite a bit to to wait.
Yeah,
And
sorry.
then, no, that's all right, because like we knew it was going to be a long day, so it wasn't a big issue. I mean, both you and I were filming and photographing a lot anyway, so we weren't going terribly fast. But yeah,
I was just feeling like, just when will this be over? Just feeling wretched. There were a few good points. I enjoyed seeing the alpine flowers, or the Tasmanian flowers, and little bugs and things. So that was pretty cool.
yeah, I think at one point it's when you reach the first like rocky spire bit, and I
Yeah.
saw the Tasmanian starflower, and I was just like,
Yeah.
Bonny, this will perk Bonny up.
And I think it did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got, like as you said, it's kind of like steep part, ridge, another steepish part, and then it's like up and down towards the summit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the summit itself was pretty flat.
Yeah, like it's just, it kind of, because we couldn't see where it was.
Oh, actually, it doesn't go over the summit. We were, like, the track goes a little bit below the summit. Although I think it wouldn't have been, if you wanted to just go off track just a short distance, you could have
I
gotten
think
there,
it's
which we didn't
another
bother doing. But
100 meters vertically
Yeah.
and along a ridge line, but I don't think we could actually see the ridge
no, we
line.
couldn't
No.
see anything.
Yeah.
So
Because
wasn't
the
much
trail
point.
kind of veers to the, I think, to the east and around from where the summit is.
Yeah.
I find it quite interesting because, like, as you were saying, you know, like the alpine flowers that appear as you get to a certain point, and then it became like just a just clear rocky plateau.
Yeah.
And then as we kept going, it became like more the alpine scenery that I'm used to seeing in like central Tassie. Like you
Yeah.
saw some pencil pines and some waratahs.
Waratahs, yeah.
And Pandani as well. I
Yeah.
think it was the first time I was like, oh, Pandani.
Yeah. So that was cool, like seeing that transition and seeing sort of a micro environment up there for this area.
And it was much, much cooler once we got into the cloud cover as well. Like it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like complete night and day from the previous day.
Yeah, I think we're even
Absolutely.
putting jumpers and coats on up there. Or
Yeah, we did.
Jumpers at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, no reception at the top.
No, we spent a while trying to send messages.
Yeah, I got
Up
a
there for
message.
ages.
I did get a message sent, but I was really hoping to speak to Alyssa because I had told her, oh well, we'll be on a mountain, we'll get reception. Nope.
Yeah.
So well.
Yeah. And then heading down, so we'd made the decision because it was quite cold and cloudy that we'd have lunch at the high camp, which is, I think it's like a 50 to 100 meter descent, like vertically from the summit area.
Mm.
And that was through really nice like waratahs, mountain rockets. There was that little stream that we thought was the fresh alpine stream that's at the high camp.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just limited visibility, but it just felt really, really cool.
Yeah, and there was that grassy area that we got to sit on, which was a bit soggy, but
Very soggy.
yeah.
Yeah. Just stopping for lunch. And I remember you, Bonnie, like putting your pack down and then you just like literally laid down on the ground. And I was like,
Yeah.
Bonnie, eat something. And you like rose like a zombie being like, yes. But yeah, from high camp, it's just, there's a little bit of an exposed area and we could sort of see, I think there's one of the points down below.
Yeah.
But then the cloud cover kind of was a bit too much, and then we entered the heavily vegetated rainforest side of the mountain,
Yep.
which is just a complete stark difference to what we climbed up, like being all exposed with steps, and then you're into this like muddy, rooty, like tunnel.
Yeah.
which-
It's like a completely different area, and a lot of people say the climb is not as hard as the descent, and I totally agree with that.
yeah, the descent much slower because you have to think about every step.
Yeah.
You've got to like position your hands. You've got to go over like tree branches and rocks and everything.
Real obstacle course.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I remember just like, because my watch has this like rudimentary altitude figure on it. And I remember looking at it being like, oh, we've still got 700
Yeah.
meters to go.
Counting down the meters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was strange. I was hating every moment of that descent. And it's really strange because that's actually the sort of hiking I love. Like, I really like obstacle course hiking. But I was just miserable. And I was sort of thinking, oh, why am I doing this? I need a new hobby. And then I was also a little bit anxious about it because I wasn't feeling well. I was dizzy, and I thought if I break an ankle here, I'd be waiting for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours for some very elaborate rescue situation, because it's not like that you could just flying a helicopter to that steep descent or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I was quite mindful of not having an injury in that location. Well, obviously be careful anywhere, but even more so.
Yeah, and I think there's, you're quite right. There's a very real risk, even if you are at, your best, to slip, and a fall here would be quite a significant injury.
Yeah,
and it would be very easy to fall as well. Could we just take one wrong step on a slippery patch of rock?
And there's like low-lying branches you could hit your head on. You could hit your head on a rock.
Probably making it sound worse than it is really.
Yeah.
Well, if you're an experienced hiker and
Yeah.
you know what you're doing and you're careful about where you're stepping, it's really only like a freak accident you have to worry about, which you can't control. So.
Or you could get your hiking umbrella stuck on a tree, which
yes.
happened constantly. I mean, I worked out later how to position it so that it didn't keep knocking things.
Yeah.
But on this day, I just kept getting stuck. And also, the handle extends out, and the handle would get stuck onto things. And then I would move to get away, and the handle would just...
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it did.
So thank you, Mark, for helping me many, many times over this descent.
That's all right. I actually really enjoyed the descent. Apart from at certain points stopping and you're like, this is going to take forever. Like the scenery was fantastic.
I must say there were lots of really nice ferns and mosses and things like that. Like I wasn't appreciating it at the time, but yeah, it was quite nice. And luckily we had more jungle-ish type scenery further down the track as well on other days.
So yeah, it's a long way, and then I think goal for us was Low Camp, the Ironbound's Low Camp, and we were going to stop for a little bit there, but that just seemed to never ever
it went
be
on
close.
forever.
Yeah,
I know.
And
then it's not that long in distance. It's just you just got to go slowly.
Yeah, and I remember
I did anyway.
Like you said the altitude we were at we should be there.
Yeah.
I was like, no, why is it taking so long?
There was that really weird uphill bit. It was like a 5 meter
right.
climb, and you're like, what the hell is this? After being so long on the downhill.
Yeah.
But we didn't stay there for very long, so we'd been on our feet for quite a while up until that point, and there was a bit of a worry that we wouldn't reach camp with enough time to get dinner and everything done before dark. But then I think this is where the frustration really set in for me, is we reached that creek, which was really, really beautiful, and we took the right turn, which some people didn't do.
You could very easily take the wrong turn at that creek, because there's what looks like a trail going
straight on.
Upstream.
Yeah. And it looks more obvious than the actual track.
Yeah.
Which is good that, because we had the guidebooks, we knew... he warned you don't go upstream, but the Kiwi couple didn't, and they took that wrong turn. But had I have not known that, I probably would have gone the same way.
Yep.
But then, just the elevation chart from here is it basically drops all the way down to sea level as if it's an easier descent. And it was just undulating the whole time. It actually felt like we were climbing more than we were descending.
Just up, down, up, down, up, down.
Yeah.
But you don't see that on the elevation chart at all.
Yeah, this is the pitfall of the John Chapman way of doing elevation charts, is that he sort of averages it out, because he does say, if you read the description, he says undulations, but if you look at the map, there's no relationship to that. And this is something a lot of people get caught out with his elevation charts on other trails as well, because he does this where it's just none of the little micro climbs are in there.
Yeah. But I mean, it was I was a bit annoyed, but it was beautiful scenery still, and I had to stop and calm myself down and be just enjoy it. You're out here, you're enjoying taking photos. You're probably never going to be here again, or I might go back. You never know.
And as we got to camp, there are some really nice ocean glimpses along the rocky coastline.
Yeah, lots of little bays, and you're kind of high above them, but you can still see the geology and everything working.
They reminded me a lot of Fitzgerald River if there was forest right to the beach.
Yeah.
The formations looked similar to some of the
Possibly even a
formations
similar
there.
rock type, like quartzite type rock.
Yeah, probably is.
Yeah, just the way that the geology of it with the fault lines, and how at certain beaches you just have diagonal lines of the rock layers.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool. But we eventually reached camp after I think 11 and a half hours total.
Oh gosh. Sorry, that was probably all my fault.
No, that's
No,
fine.
I think it was
and
we
we were
all
filming
went.
as well.
Yeah.
There's lots of factors going into that day, but camp is beautiful. Like Little Deadman's Bay itself is a little rocky cove. They said there were 2 creeks there, but we really only crossed one, which was the one that you fill up your water at. Again, full campsite. There was a lot of young'uns.
Yeah, there was
Like
a
they were just
massive group.
Yeah, I think they were staying there 2 nights.
Yeah, they just had this
They had
very
a tarp and
chill
everything.
vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also like I know like coming down off the mountain and coming into camp, and there was this massive group. I just was not in the mood to talk to them, and like
Oh.
Grumpy Don.
yeah, because like Tim, who was hiking on the same itinerary as us, was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And I was like, not interested in talking right now. And he was just being friendly, but I was just like, my feet were hurting. I just wanted to set up camp, and I just was like, there's too many people here for me to like talk.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, dude, you're filming. You're just like, yes. Goodbye.
yeah, because that's something that people will ask you the same questions about filming, and I'm just like, I don't really feel like answering those questions right now.
That's good promo. You're like, follow the long ways better.
Yeah, I should have probably pushed it a bit more.
But I thought the campsite was lovely, and it was sort of similar to the Point Eric campsite in a way. It was like the first night's campsite, in that where you put your tent is directly above the water. And then the beach was a very rocky beach, so kind of a bit tricky to walk on, but lovely for a swim, which I did, an evening swim.
Yeah,
Very
in amongst
refreshing.
all the kelp.
Yep. Yeah, I made a mistake. I swam in this shallow lagoon, and it was very shallow, and then later I realised if I'd swum on the other side of the bay, it was a nice, more sandy, deeper area. Would have been much better, but it was still nice.
I quite liked there was like a rock shelf that you could sit on and contemplate the ocean.
Yeah.
That was
really
near
nice.
us. I remember after dinner, I was just like, I'm just going to go down and watch the sunset. And like the sun came out for like a brief second and like lit everything up. I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, the long day. I think we finally got over the ironbounds, and then we could relax a little bit.
Yes.
So day 4 is Little Deadman's Bay to we camped at Osmeridian Beach, which is a side track off the main South Coast track. If you want a shorter day here, you can camp at the Prion Boat Crossing, which is a big highlight of the day and very similar to what we've all done on the Bib before, just after Peaceful Bay.
Yeah.
But to start with, we got lost. We didn't know where the camp or where the track exited the beach. We thought it was at the end. No one was really sure in camp that we talked to.
Yeah, we had people asking us, where do you go to get to the track? And we're like, oh, we don't know. So
But
yeah,
it's
we
like-
had to hunt around for where the track leaves the beach.
It's
But we
like
found it.
halfway around, and there's like a can, and when you see
Yeah.
it, you're like, oh, that's obvious. But like,
Yeah.
But yeah, you kind of like off the beach, a little bit of like tallish forest, and then onto more button grass plains. But it's very, very narrow. This section's very short in terms of the button grass before you're back into the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, nice boardwalk, so it's not like a muddy plain. It was, quite easy and nice.
And the good thing about this bit is you could look back at the ironbounds, which you didn't get coming down them. So you'd be like, I, in inverted commas, conquered you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then into the forest, and like I completely forgot about this first part of the day until I looked at my photos again.
Yeah.
Nice
Some-
little beaches.
Yeah, there's some nice forest in between the beaches, and then there's Turoa Beach, I think it is.
Yeah.
Which is beautiful section. We had the sun come out there, and there's this nice meditative walking.
Yeah. And you can see in the videos that like Bonnie's in a much better mood through this section. Like you're like you're like laughing. Like there's a bit where I'm filming Bonnie walking, and Bonnie's got her shoes off and I don't, and then water comes in. I'm like, oh, gotta get out of here, and like you kind of like wave at me, and you can see that you're feeling a lot better there.
Yeah, well, I was feeling heaps better. The day before I had the worst headache. It was just horrendous. And then I think I've got these like painkillers I didn't think I was going to use, but they're like Panadol and ibuprofen combined. So I took 2 of them, and then I seem to have been good after that.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a chippier morning.
Yeah.
And then exiting that beach, there was like that rocky platform where the creek comes in, and then beautiful, like very much coastal forest, which we hadn't really got too much of. There was lots of like
Yeah.
ferns and grasses and banksias through here.
Yeah.
And then kind of up and down a little bit, there's that really cool long log, mossy log that you walk on. It's kind of like
that's right.
Wirraway Bridge
I'd forgotten
or
about that.
boarding house bridge. Yeah.
Mm.
And then the descent down to the beach where there's another little creek where you can fill up.
Yep.
That was quite a cool little like corner.
It
Yeah.
was. And that was the start of Prion Beach, which for me, that was one of my favourite beaches, I think. I thought it was really beautiful, even though it was long.
Mm.
It just felt so remote and pristine, and you could see the mountains behind the beach as well, and really cool islands offshore.
And firm underfoot as well.
Yeah, easy
Yeah.
walking. Yep, that
And
makes a
because
difference.
it's, like, I think, is it the longest beach section
I
you'll
think
walk
so.
on?
Yeah.
So you could kind of just like take your shoes off and relax for that whole section.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, in the end, like you bolted off into the distance. Bonnie was like looking at everything on the beach, and I was kind
As
of
I
in the
always do.
middle. I
Yeah.
think at that point I
Yeah.
was like, I think I put music on. I was just like, it was just like a really nice time just to just be walking and enjoy
Yeah.
like the whole thing.
I think I kind of got to a point where I was like, yeah, I'm enjoying this, but I just kind of want to sit down. And I knew that the boat crossing would be a nice spot to sit down and just take it all in.
Yeah.
So I felt like, oh yeah, I'll just push on, have a break there, and then the guys will catch up, and I can set up the shot for when you were descending through the sand dune. Yeah.
But yeah, very, very easy to spot the beach exits. A lot of them are. They're just like a tangle of buoys and fishing nets and ropes.
Flotsam and jetsam.
Yeah,
Yes.
that is the technical term. Yeah. So this one, yeah, you kind of like round the corner into the dunes to go into the lagoon, and you like see those really cool views of Precipitous Bluff and the lagoon and the boat crossing. It's
Yeah. When you say lagoon, you really mean a river.
yes.
No, but it's called New
It's
River
called
It's
Lagoon.
called
lagoon.
New River Lagoon,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
like a estuary river type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, amazing views of the mountains. Like we could see Precipitous Bluff and Federation Peak. Yeah, it was really beautiful, and I'm glad that it was a relatively clear day, so we could see those peaks. And it made me want to do what's it called? Is it the Southern Ranges?
Southern Ranges,
Yeah, I
yeah.
really want to do that now. Goes over Precipitous Bluff, another hike.
Yeah. Really cool. And then for some reason, instead of canoes, they have
Rowboats.
rowboats.
Yeah.
So what
Sure, a
would
bit
that be
heavier.
like? 300 meters, 400 meters, maybe.
I think
The
I
boat
think
crossing?
it's variable depending on the water levels.
Yeah.
So we were there. I think it was lower tide, wasn't it? Because we had
We
to
had to
drag it
drag
quite
the
a
boat,
way
yeah.
up.
Yeah,
So
and that was really quite difficult. I thought dragging the rowboats down to the water and then back out. And I thought
Yes.
if I was on my own, I would really struggle. I would have had to have sat there and waited for high tide. Yeah, it was not easy.
yeah,
Or it might have been just we had the wrong technique of moving the boats. We did realise if you lift them up and pull them along, it's easier.
Yeah, that would be my tip. But towards the end, I was like, if you just lift them up and drag
Yeah, that
them,
was
there's
heaps
less
easier.
surface area.
yeah.
But yeah, they're quite fun. They're not easy to control compared to a canoe.
Yeah, because you can't see where you're going.
And it's
Yeah.
like a weird, like, you go back and then, like, I was watching you guys because Bonnie and Donovan went over first, and then Bonnie stayed on the other side, and Donovan came back, and then I rode Donovan back. But I was watching from the shore, like, trying to
With
practice my, like, technique.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite funny. And then I also wanted the shot of Donovan sitting in the rowboat with his umbrella, like, just classical. Is it like
Yeah.
Pride and Prejudice kind of like
Yeah.
scene?
It did look like that.
It was. I mean, I'll say that's one thing that's cool about the boat is, compared to like a kayak, a rowboat is more sort of steady. So I was able to film both Mark and Bonnie as we were crossing. Plus, I was able to sit there with the umbrella and enjoy it. Whereas I feel I probably would have capsized had I done that on a kayak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the lagoon's really cool. There's lots of bird life there. There were swans, seagulls, like shags, I think, as well. It's just lots and lots of bird life. So yeah, and we made it to the other side in decent time. It didn't take as long as I thought it would. And then there's the campsite on the, what is that, the northern side of the lagoon, with some really cool fishing net hammocks.
People had made hammocks out of old fishing nets.
I was like, they should like make that a feature, like make them in Hobart or wherever Tassie Parks is, and like fly them out and install them in every campsite, because they were cool.
Yeah, it would have been great to have them. And, we saw a guy who was camping like that on the first day and then never saw him again.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it would have been nice, especially because all of these campsites have trees by water. So it definitely is doable.
And there's no real places for you to sit down unless you bring your own ultralight hiking chair, which someone did and was very proud of himself for that decision. So that's where we had lunch. Kind of watched some people attempt the boat crossing. I can't remember who it was, but they didn't look like they were doing it very well.
Yeah, their rowing technique was less than optimal.
Yeah. But then from campsite at Prion Boat Crossing, we had like another 4 or 5 k's to go to Osmeridian. It's very like up and down through coastal scenes. You've got views of the river and the ocean at certain points.
And those views were really beautiful from that section.
Yeah.
The river and ocean and beach.
And then reading the guidebook, it was just like, and you have to wade through this creek and then you walk along the edge of it to get to the side of the hill where you hike up. And like looking down at the creek, I was like, there's no way we're going to be able to walk that. Like it would look deep
we
and
could have
wide.
with difficulty.
Yeah.
Getting our knees wet.
Like compared to like other creek crossings that were like meant to be bad, that seemed quite like challenging. But then when we got descended down the hill, Tassie Parks had built a new bridge for us.
Yes, that was a nice surprise. I think that was built. It was built since the book was written.
Yeah, it looked new.
But it's in Chapman's website as an addendum.
Okay, yeah, because I looked at the updated guidebooks in all the hiking stores in Hobart when we got back, and there's just no mention of it at all, so it must be fairly recent.
Yeah, because my copy is the edition before the current edition, because, we're thinking, how much is this trail going to change? Not much. But yeah, this is one thing that has changed even since the most recent edition.
And then after that, because they put the bridge in, they've had to install new trail, and it was just very hilly and sandy and up and down.
Yeah, just little undulations that add up.
Yeah,
it's quite pleasant though.
It was, because you like looking inland, you got all the mountains that look quite cool, and then you got closer to the coast, and I quite enjoyed that section.
Yep.
And then it's kind of like openish area until you reach the turn off to Osmeridian Beach.
Yeah, which had, I think, the two sort of main features you saw. This was Chicken Island, and the toilet.
Yes,
as like this glowing beacon on top of the hill near the campsite.
Yeah, not too far, but then like from the turn off into camp, there was like unexpected muddy bit.
Yes,
super muddy.
I think I went thigh deep into the mud.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was knee deep, I can't remember, but it was deep.
Yeah.
So I got very, very muddy just before camp. And I remember I just sort of lost all my energy just before we got to camp as well. So I was like, oh, great. But then the campsite was quite nice.
Now I remember why you were doing the cleaning lady thing with washing all your stuff.
No, well, I was washing my stuff anyway.
Yeah.
It wasn't just because I was muddy. I washed my shirt. That wasn't muddy.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And you kind of arrive into camp, and it's Tyler's Creek that you cross.
Yeah.
And the guidebook says fill up
further back, which we didn't do.
No, and it was okay to drink. It just been
very tannic.
The height of summer, there wasn't much flow. It was very tannic.
Yeah, I was a little bit sus about that water. I was like, oh, I hope it's all right. And putting, was wanting to boil it a bit more when we were cooking dinner, but we don't seem to have had any problems from it. So.
Touch wood.
I think a couple of months on, I think we would know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the campsite's right sort of on the creekish. It's one of the ones that's not as scenic at the initial campsite, but you can walk down Tyler's Creek to Osmeridian Beach, and that's quite a wild place. A
wild, wavy beach, which surprisingly you don't get that many wild, wavy beaches on the South Coast Track, or at least the conditions that we had, they weren't that wavy. But this one was like big waves, and I was very tempted to go for a swim, but ultimately decided not to because it's probably lots of rips and lots of blue bottles. So I just had a little splash around in where the river meets the sea.
Yeah.
Washed my clothes.
No, it was a really cool spot. I mean, it was one of those things where we were kind of late-ish into camp, and we kind of wandered down, and then that was it. We were kind of doing dinner, and then I was expecting to be at camp for like 6 or 7 hours in the daylight and like doing all this cool stuff, but we never really got that until the last couple of nights, I would say.
Yeah.
So that is days 1 to 4 of the South Coast track. In real time, we're going to keep going and recording, but for everyone listening at home, this will be a couple of weeks between releases.
Yep. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode or any other episode of Real Trail Talk, then please rate us on whatever platform you're currently listening to us on. Ratings really help us to reach an audience, especially those who are looking to learn about the outdoors in Western Australia and Australia in general. If you had any questions or suggestions for future episodes, you can email us at realtrailtalk@gmail.com or contact us through our social media channels. Thanks again, and stay tuned for our next episode.